Good afternoon, and welcome to this panel. I have to say that I'm very excited that you're all here today. This has been a conversation on entrepreneurship that's focused on investment in Africa that has been a long time in the making. And what I love to see is the maturity of this conversation. It's begun over a few decades now. But what is really exciting to see is during the Global Entrepreneurship Summit how much effort and work that has been put into putting this together. And I see a lot of great familiar faces that are out here in the audience. So I don't want to take too long on the opening of this session. I'm looking forward to a discussion and a great opportunity to talk to our panelists today. Some of you may know that I just came from the Global Launch Lounge, where together with 500 startups and we just announced a partnership for the first ever Geeks on a Plane trip to Africa that's going to take place in March of 2017. So it's, yeah. So why is this so exciting? So Geeks on a Plane is an invite-only tour for startups, investors, and tech leaders to learn about high-growth technology throughout the world. They've already done 17 trips globally, but this is their first to sub-Saharan Africa. They're going to go first to, well, I should say we because we're partnering, on Ghana and South Africa, which will culminate in at the Global Entrepreneurship Congress in Johannesburg. So again, keeping a lot of this energy that we're feeling today alive. As we know, the idea of spurring job creation in sub-Saharan Africa is an enormous challenge. Over the next 15 years, the global economy has to create 600 million jobs to keep pace with the growth rates. We know that that's not going to necessarily be the answer, and so that's why entrepreneurship is so critical and important. The place where the most urgent need for some of the job creation is in sub-Saharan Africa. And I think the place where a lot of the excitement is coming is also in this space. And yet, what we know and what we're seeing is that there's still a challenge in investors wanting to invest on the continent from the United States. And we also know that there's still a question from entrepreneurs about what are investors actually looking for. And so while we're maturing the conversation and having sort of great discussions about the possibilities and the potential that's out there, there still seems to be somewhat of a gap. Today, we know that the productive and high-paying jobs are not going to keep pace. We know that a lot of the creative solutions that are coming out of Africa can be adapted to local contexts, and that the entrepreneurs that are here at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit and in a lot of different incubators throughout the world are looking at what technologies are coming out from other places and actually thinking about how to adapt them. So we're hoping that the session is going to be fairly interactive. So if you're sitting in these seats and are scared of asking questions or thought that you were just going to passively listen, we're encouraging you to be an active participant. We're trying to take the first part of this to introduce who this wonderful panel of investors and entrepreneurs are, and then we'll sort of talk them through sort of where their journey is and what their impressions are, but then leave a significant portion of time for all of you to talk to us. So just before we quickly get started and ask the questions and introduce the panel, can I just get a sense of how many entrepreneurs are actually in the audience? If you're an entrepreneur, can you raise your hand? Wow.
Wow.
Can I get a sense of how many of you are entrepreneurs that work in Africa? That's fantastic. Any investors in the room? Fantastic. And any people who don't work in Africa or were just interested in hearing about this for the first time and are just sort of trying to figure out what's going on in the space? I love that. It's a great diversity of folks, so we know who we're talking to. So maybe just to first start out with a couple of questions, and this will allow you to introduce yourselves as well, because I think you can introduce yourselves as a panel better than I can by telling the audience about your actual experience and where you're going. So maybe Esther.
Oh, okay.
We'll start with you. You're an investor. You have many firms, and you've been nurturing startups for a number of years. Are there any good examples of investments in startups that you can share with us? And can you tell us a little bit about what you do as part of that answer?
Okay, so
first I should explain what kind of investor I am. I'm an angel investor, which means that I invest in things that are not yet complete. Ideally, there's a person and a team and an idea, and it would cost too much money to do real due diligence, so I just invest on faith. And that's very different from what an investor will do later on, where they want to see your numbers and interview your customers and do a whole lot of due diligence. But at this stage, your chances of success are very low, so you put in a small amount of money at a low valuation, and the economics works. So amazingly, I've made 4 investments in Africa, and they're all still alive. That's not typical. I've made probably 10 or 15 investments in Russia, and maybe 3 of them are really working. I've made 150 investments in total, and I can't even remember some of them. So just to understand, I'm happy to talk about what I do, and it's very important at the beginning, but it's very different from your typical investor who has a VC fund. So that's probably enough.
No, it's great. So Eric.
I sort of stumbled into doing this. So in the late 90s, I helped build a couple of ISPs across Africa. And through that process, we built Busy Internet, and that's how I met Esther, and we became great friends afterwards. And essentially, I sort of got into angel investing a little bit with sort of following Esther, really. First time I encountered her was kind of an interesting experience. And I sort of, being somebody who's built companies across Africa, I sort of believed that I should then sort of also invest in the next generation of entrepreneurs. And so I sort of happen to be lucky because I sort of have seen the transition from Africa going into mobile and leapfrogging the world in the late 90s. And I guess all of you are familiar with the story. But I think what happened into 2007, 2008 was that we were just consuming technology. In other words, Africans were online using mobile and mobile first, but mostly looking at Facebook and Twitter and that sort of stuff. And then this new idea of creating technology. So we switched from the consumption of technology to the creation of technology. And I think that was a really huge sort of paradigm shift. And so we started seeing a new generation of entrepreneurs who were saying, I can build the next Facebook, I can build the next Google out of Africa. And these were people who haven't done it before. These were mostly, some of them never gone to college before, some of them don't even know how to write code, haven't run a business before. And for me, that was kind of striking. And I'll end my story by a company that I just backed called Forhey, Forhey.com. So this entrepreneur, in his mid-20s. In his first venture, he went to MEST, which is a school that trains entrepreneurs and essentially gives them the first funding to get started, which I helped start in 2007. And his venture failed miserably. But according to Caldic, he realized that he was trying to disrupt an industry that he didn't understand. And so guess what? He wanted to do his second startup, and he wanted to disrupt the laundry industry. So he actually got his uncle, who lives in the US, to get him to New Jersey. And his uncle thought, oh, finally I got him over to leave Ghana and stay here. But he had a plan to go and intern at a laundry. So he went to a laundry in New York and interned for 9 months to a year. Volunteered not to be paid, but the laundry owner was nice enough to pay him, and so he saved the money. And basically came back to Ghana right after and started this company. And essentially he's built an Uber for laundry. So imagine that whatever dress you're wearing today, you want to wear it tomorrow. He will say, go into my app, ask me to pick it up at 6 p.m. or 9 p.m. tonight, and I'll bring it back to you tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Right. I mean, this is something striking about this story. First of all, somebody's age living in Ghana comes to the US, never goes back. Right? When you come here, that's it. But he came with a mission and focused on that mission and went back and started a company. When he told me a story, I couldn't help but back him. Right. And I think that second moral of the story is that this is somebody who's failed, but stood up, dusted himself, and believed I can conquer the world. And I can actually build a company. I can actually build an Uber for laundry out of Africa. For me, this is the most empowering thing about Africa today, which makes me very excited, wakes me up, keeps me flying all the time, and looking to support these entrepreneurs and looking to invest. I invest my own money like Esther does, and I also now have a fund where we invest other people's money. I believe that Africa is going to produce the greatest technology company of the 21st century. Maybe mobile money is one of them. How many of you have heard of mobile money? It came from Africa.
I was going to say the big question is why don't we have this mobile app for laundry pickup in the United States? So, Mamadou, just to refine, you're providing technical assistance to entrepreneurs. Can you tell us about your efforts in supporting African entrepreneurs to become investment ready?
Yes, basically I decided to launch Ubuntu Investment Company, which is I would call it a catalyst fund. It came basically from realizing that if you look at the investment market today in Africa, most of the capital available is growth capital, right? So concentrated to four companies that are, let's say at maturity level, that have so many years of expertise, of existence, etc., where technically there's no risk. Now, the reality is that the biggest need of capital is way earlier in the chain, right? So, that's, at business angels, venture capital, where there's almost none on the continent. And beyond capital, they need technical assistance, which is actual basic, know-how, have access to the right ecosystem to be able to flourish. And if you look at the Silicon Valley, the major strength of the Silicon Valley is the capacity to provide an ecosystem for entrepreneurs to actually grow. So what Ubuntu Capital Investment Company is doing is basically creating this ecosystem and this environment where we channel capacity building, but we also work on advisory and an advocacy for the regulatory framework to create that enabling environment for those companies to take off. So we see ourselves more than just a fund, but more like a partner that not only provides the capital, but all the necessary tools that are human, technical, and social for those companies to actually thrive. So
that's wonderful. Great. And Ganesh?
Yes.
Ganesh is my fellow bureaucrat on the stage, so many of you know that I'm from the U.S. Agency for International Development, and Ganesh is here with the World Bank. He also has some private sector experience, and coming from the bank, straddles the world between donor development and some of the financing. And so as you sort of describe a little bit about what the bank is doing, maybe also answer the question that I have been hearing a lot when I traveled around to sub-Saharan Africa this summer. Again, some of you know that this conversation that we're having today is the sort of culmination of a series of conversations that we've had over the past year that we've called the Road to the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. And we've held a series of conversations in sub-Saharan Africa, hosting many global entrepreneurship summits in different countries. And one of the things that we heard from entrepreneurs in sub-Saharan Africa was, we hear a lot about, USAID, State Department, World Bank, other donors wanting to provide funding. But we know that if we take that money, that then investors won't look at us seriously. So as you're sort of talking about what the bank is doing, I think it would be an interesting sort of question to you. What would your response be to that?
Okay, thank you, Linda. I'm first very happy to see so many entrepreneurs in this room who are working in Africa. So let me just maybe begin by saying what we do in the World Bank in this space. So we work at sort of two levels. One is at the ecosystem level, working with governments on improving the business environment for entrepreneurs, tax policy, business entry and exit legislation, regulatory frameworks, the pain points that all of you face in running your businesses, starting your businesses, running your businesses, and exiting if you wish to exit. So that's sort of the bread and butter work that we do. So what we also do is we support entrepreneurs directly through a network of business incubators and accelerators. And we do this, and we have a sector-specific focus for this in 3 sectors. One is on digital, which has been our longest-running program through InfoDev. Some of you may know InfoDev. And now we also have a more recent program on climate technology, on climate mitigation, climate adaptation technology, innovation, and more recently in agribusiness entrepreneurship. With agribusiness entrepreneurship, it's really about helping firms that are ready to scale up, to grow, to support them sort of at the firm level through technical assistance and so on. So what kind of support do we provide to these entrepreneurs? I think maybe there are 3 or 4 thematic areas of support. One is technical training, coaching, mentoring, linking them to other entrepreneurs around the world. So we have a network, for example, of climate tech incubators. And some of the top incubators in the US, for example, are partnering with our incubators in Kenya and Ghana and South Africa and so on. So that's a very important part of what we do, to provide a platform for experience exchange, for knowledge exchange, also for potential investments. 2 is to connect them to people like Eric and my colleagues in the panel, to potential investors, to help them to be prepared, to be able to talk to people like them and understand what their needs are and how they need to, prepare their financial projections, their business plans, and so on. So that's the second sort of thematic area of support we do. And then the third area is really, which is quite important in Africa. This is the intangible support, getting the entrepreneurs to interact with each other, to have sessions where they can come together and have exchanges and talk and basically support each other. It's almost like a peer counseling, peer fellowship of entrepreneurs. And that's been really, really powerful. If you ask our entrepreneurs what kind of support they value this quite a bit, because being an entrepreneur in Africa, as many of you can testify, can be very lonely. You feel on your own, you don't know who else is in this space, you're not sure whether your idea is protected, whether somebody else will steal your idea. So trying to kind of manage that. So in a sense, I'm an investor of either the first resort or the last resort, depending on how you look at it. We take the risk. We want to invest to de-risk the business opportunity for the investors like Eric and my other colleagues. So to the second question on the role of grant funding. So if you take a venture life cycle approach, which is what we are thinking about now for an SME, for a small enterprise. So if you're starting from pre-seed, seed to sort of early stage to the point where a venture is able to attract attention for debt or equity or other forms of financing, we want to be in this early space, because that's a space where I think a grant, a small grant, can go a long way in addressing a specific market failure over a very tight period of time to address a specific issue with an exit plan. So it's not a substitute for investors. It's not a substitute for debt or capital. It is to address a market failure. I mean, if you take that approach, then so what we do, proof of concept grants. We provide 100% grant for coaching, for boot camps, for training, technical assistance, and then we kind of graduate towards matching grants. We're talking about co-investment grants. It's a matching component as well from the entrepreneur. So it depends on the stage of the venture. It depends on the needs of the entrepreneur. It depends on the country context and so on. So I am a firm believer that there's space for grant support, and which can help to build a pipeline for investors and de-risk the opportunities for investors.
So I'm gonna turn the same question over to Esther, and just ask, as an investor, when you're looking at entrepreneurs, companies that are sort of coming out of those startup phase, and they say, I have this mix of grant funding versus this revenue that I've already raised from private capital. What is your impression, and how do you look at them?
So almost any question you ask me, I'll probably say it depends. Right. Because you need to think about what the context is. What strings were attached with the money? Does it limit? So many startups, they start up doing one thing, like Nominini, which started selling airtime through little printers and now is a much more general marketing company, for example. They change what they're doing, and if they have some kind of restriction, then they lose that flexibility. One area that wasn't mentioned, often your best source of capital is from your customers, because then they don't take equity. And a government or even an investor may not understand what the market really wants. You've sold them a great idea, they'll give you money. But when you get your money from customers, they know what they want. And they're great because they really tell you what it is that they need, their needs change. They want you to be successful because they're counting on you for products. They're going to tell you how to make things better. It varies. If it's a consumer product, that's not so easy, but maybe your consumer product you can sell through a distributor who will provide some of that same role. And by the way, your distributor probably trains its sales force. Maybe that distributor could train your sales force as well. I think corporates have a huge role here that sometimes gets forgotten because everybody thinks they're old and boring, and they are. But they have a lot of spare capacity. So I really look at how it works and the dynamics rather than just a blanket, yes, we love government grants or we hate them or anything like that.
That's great. So, go ahead.
If I may, on government grants, I've been both in the multilateral and in the private sector, so I've seen both sides of the world, if I may. Let's not forget a few things, at least in Africa. You talk about mobile money. It started with actually a grant, right? And it was a grant. I think DFID was involved, and I'm not sure if others were.
USAID.
And somebody at the
USAID
central
was
bank.
involved, right? I didn't want to, right? So I thought, and MCOPA, if you look today at Upgrade. So yes, the reality is, yes, you need the market, but before you design a product for the market, sometimes you need an institution that has the overall perspective and the neutral view that's capable to support you. And that's what has been missing a lot in Africa. And we've seen that when it happens, it makes a significant difference, right? And I personally encourage that. And, in a lot of cases, like the ones I gave, it generally triggers significant, not only growth potential, but a market shift. If you look at mobile money today, it started in Africa, but it started also with the belief and the kind of consensus of multilaterals and private players about the need to address a market gap. So this is, for me, quite essential. And the same way as when we speak about accelerators and incubators and pre-seed or seed level, even if you use crowdfunding, right, you still need that level where there is a bit of support. So what you normally, as an entrepreneur, because I'm also on the other side, what you call the triple F, right? Fools, friends, and family. Yeah, that's what it's called. Most entrepreneurs start with those three things, but as an Africans, if you come from a poor village, so who in the fools, the friends, and the family is going to help you? No one. It's a reality too, right? So how do you address this mismatch? And unfortunately, our governments have so many problems to solve that they can't always address those. So yes, you bring, and that's why, from an Ubuntu Capital point of view, we leverage on the different players, private sector, multilaterals, etc., to incubate that phase. Because a lot of those ideas will need that kind of support to actually take off.
Mamadi, to add to that also on the mobile money. So the other part is that, mobile money, M-Pesa wouldn't have happened if somebody at the central bank didn't turn a blind eye. Right? Imagine the central bank in Kenya said, no, you can't do that. So one of the roles that government can play is just sometimes been sort of taking it easy.
Not to play a role.
Yeah, not to play
Play,
around.
just chill,
Yeah.
just relax. Don't always try to sort of we control stuff, and that's a silent and a very important role in making innovation sort of come out, right? And that's a role that's sometimes difficult to quantify, but a very, very important role. I had a recent experience where I backed a company in Bitcoin space, and our central bank wasn't too happy, and the guy disappeared because the central bank wrote a letter that he was like, "No, I'm off."
And there's going to be a panel, I think it's later this afternoon, is it today or tomorrow, that's going to talk about actually what role government should and should not actually play in this space, which I think I encourage you all to think about attending. Our administrator for USAID will be one of the highlighted speakers. So another question, just for all of you, and maybe I'll start with Ganesh. When I was in South Africa and Accra and Kigali, again, very consistent types of feedback from a lot of the entrepreneurs that we were talking to was that, when we look at investors, it's great when you talk about angel investors coming from Silicon Valley who are willing to take these risks on you, right? Willing to, look at an idea, love it, fund you, move forward. That's not what we're dealing with in Africa.
Yeah,
Our investors are conservative.
Yeah.
They want you to have the entire business plan, have profits, have your customers all set. They're a different type
And 3 digits IRR.
angel. They're a different type of angel investor, and maybe we don't always feel like they're angelic. So maybe just I would love to get all of the panels sort of reactions to levels of conservatism when you're looking at how you view investors here versus the nature of the investors that a lot of the African entrepreneurs might be chasing.
Yeah, so let me just start by saying I'm very bullish on Africa. So I think, as you said earlier, Eric, I think the next big tech firm is going to come out of Africa. Maybe Nairobi, I used to live before, or maybe somewhere else. But I think, let me give you a sort of a concrete example of what we are doing, and maybe this will excite some of the people here. We're about to launch in Africa a Pan-African accelerator program for digital entrepreneurs. So what we have done is, over the last sort of 5-10 years, we've built a network of mobile labs in Africa, Nairobi, Dakar, Senegal, and South Africa. And this is through grant funding. So the first stage was just to get the basics in place through grant funding. So now we want to use these hubs and the networks they have built and the entrepreneurs whom they have reached out to take a Pan-African perspective. So it's to look for entrepreneurs who are ready to be scaled up, who are ready for scale up. And we want to identify 20 of these entrepreneurs from all over Africa and provide them sort of intensive support, 2-week residential program, online training, also networking and coaching. And we want to, at the same time, while we're doing this, also work with people like Eric and Mamadou, the investors, to work with them and build a pipeline with the investors. What are their needs? What are they looking for? What are the risks that they see? It's kind of work both sides, the supply and demand side of the market. So it's an experiment. We will know in the next year or so where we are. But this is just not open to those who are already in the pipeline. It's open to any one of you who has a business idea for digital entrepreneurship. And we will launch this fairly soon. So the point I'm trying to make is that you need to have a certain level of grant support to basically, beat the bushes, get everybody out, get everybody excited, get them up to a certain speed. And then the next level is a little bit more sophisticated. It's a combination of grant financing, it's a combination of working with ecosystem actors, but bringing them on board earlier than later so that they are part of the process. So I'm hoping to invite all of you to be in that network of potential investors. And out of these 20, we may have the next Google from Africa.
I can guarantee that.
Great.
So we're at the halfway point, and we do want to make sure that we retain some interaction with the folks that are here. So, but I'm still interested in the question. So
Yeah, I would just jump into real quickly. So I think that, in Africa, we're learning, right? And in angel investing, the norm is that you don't know everything. But my view that Africa is going to develop differently. It's not going to be like what happened in Silicon Valley or in Europe or in Asia, Right. But we can learn from what is happening in other parts of the world. So myself, I got into this a bit accidentally. Actually, the first company that I backed, I didn't put money. I actually helped the entrepreneurs discover that they were entrepreneurs, according to them. There's a company called SMSGH, which has become a very successful company in Ghana today, the biggest mobile value-added services company. Right. So there are different ways by which angel investors get involved. And I want you to sit in the room to realize that it's not just writing checks. You can also be an angel in your own way, where you could be supporting entrepreneurs within your community or people that you're excited about in different ways, which, for example, an entrepreneur needs $100,000 to get on a flight. If you had a private jet and you give him a ride, you've invested, right? So imagine they want a marketing support and you can provide that marketing support. That's a way of investing. So it's not just writing checks, but the ways that we can all be involved in helping African entrepreneurs. And I want to end on sort of a note that, so we've developed this framework that I call the King's countries. And essentially, when we look at Africa, we say, look, there are 54 countries. So how do you look at the countries that are leading this whole innovation ecosystem? And this is not to say the other African countries are not important or are not doing this, but there are 5 countries that we call the Kings, which is Kenya, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa. All right, these are the countries that are leading the digital economy in Africa. And I'm a very big believer in digital. I really believe that the whole argument about commodities and resources, actually, well, we know it's...
Have you been to Cameroon lately?
Yeah, correct. Actually, talking about Cameroon,
Yeah,
we have an...
I can
have a
already
private
see
chat.
the
That's
comments
all.
out
Yeah.
here.
After the session, you and I will talk.
We want to add more countries to it as they come up, so we can
Just teasing it.
revise the King's countries. But yes, Cameroon, one of my SMG, we have an operation in Cameroon. Cameroon is coming up very fast.
Yes.
It's one of the countries that is, look at Egypt, for example, Morocco, Rwanda. So we can talk about a lot of countries. But really, sort of our incentive in this, and there's a book coming out called Digital Kenya that I wrote a chapter in that's going to come out in the fall. And the idea is, and I got involved in this because I also have this intellectual part of me where I like to write, right? So we want to be able to learn some of the lessons. We want to be able to put it on paper. People can read, people can follow, people can understand what's going on. So another way you can help is by writing. If you're a journalist, if you know how to write about it. It's all part of changing the narrative.
There you go. Esther.
So very briefly, what I saw happen in Russia, and nothing's the same, but this might be a useful example. There was nothing there. And there were a bunch of foreigners who invested. There were people who did startups, basically bootstrapping them. And you have to go through that period. And then you have the people who've made money on one, and they understand, and they're willing to invest. But the other thing is they have to understand that the dynamics of that early investment are very different from the later investment. And that the cost of your successes is the money you spend on your failures. But that cost is also an investment, because even if you don't learn from those failures, often the entrepreneurs do. Right. And some of my favorite companies are companies where the guy lost me money the first time around, and I thought, wow, I invested a lot of money on this guy's education. Now let me invest again, now that he's smart. Yeah. And those are the kinds of stories you need to spread, that failure is okay. Failure is a cost of learning. Losing money is the cost of taking the risk of investing. You know, I'm not smart, I'm lucky, but I'm not that lucky. I just do it enough that some of them work. And it's that people really need to understand.
Sir.
So I also 1 minute? Okay, so I won't come back on camera. But, yes, I think, as an entrepreneur in Africa, the very important thing is, yes, money is important, but let's never forget that your product is actually the key, right? So we always think of, be the next Zuckerberg and do this and that, but remember, he started with this in that room in that Harvard school, and for many years, the point wasn't, I'm sure you saw that movie where his friend wanted to go and see the advertisers, but they were more busy constructing the product. And behind that movie, there's a key lesson, is that if your product is right, it will take off. Not only it will take off because you'll have customers, But as you get customers, you'll find investors. So, and the time we apply around that is generally not enough. Working again, the ecosystem, which means your networks, is critical, which means understanding the trends from a regulatory point of view, from the competition point of view, all that, all your environment is what, if you can read it and if you can play it while you have the right product, is really what will make you succeed. Don't put money first. Money is a consequence of your work. That's my point.
There you go. That's a powerful way to sort of set it off. Thank you, panelists, first of all, for sort of engaging in a first stage. I wanted to see if anybody had any questions to start off, because, again, this is the most interesting part, hearing, and don't be nice to them. I mean, they know what they're talking about here. I think this is the place for honest conversation and to ask some pretty serious questions. So please. No, go ahead. You can do it.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Titus. I'm from Mozambique. So please add a name and.
We're coming to Mozambique.
Yes.
There are 54 kings.
So I'm a techpreneur. I have a question, but first, maybe I will share the scenario. What happens in Mozambique now is that this internet revolution is really starting at this stage. People are getting more income. The broadband connection is expanding access to internet. So about 8 months, 1 year ago, we had this vision to integrate the necessities of the people into a single digital platform. And our dream was to integrate 5 basic pillars, which were retail, financial services, education, employment, and entertainment. And we launched this thing called Easy Shop, which is now Mozambique's first fully online supermarket with home delivery. Awesome. People thought we were crazy, that this is too soon, it won't work.
Yeah, it's always like that.
And so forth. But 8 months after, the thing is picking up. Now we have 1,000+ customers, and slowly we're getting there. So my question for you would be, what do you look when you thinking about investing in companies in countries where you really don't have a history, or there's no history of any entrepreneur that you invested previously, and that perhaps are not so famous yet as a destination of investment, but there is tremendous potential? What are the factors that you guys look into? Thank you.
Can I'll take that one if you, first, congratulations. It's interesting. We had an entrepreneurs competition last year in Mozambique. We had our annual event with Africa 2.0. I'm surprised you didn't came up. So we need to review our screening process then. I mean, yeah. First, it's great. I think the whole model, and you can see in West Africa with Jumia, etc., is really kicking off. To the point of when you come, I mean, when we arrived in Mozambique, we do have a chapter with Africa 2.0 there, right? But it's not a country where we, would say we know everyone, if you will. But it was quite interesting to see the change in entrepreneurship mindset, because contrarily to other countries, it's still it's taking its time, let's put it this way. But the model that you're looking at, I think, is quite promising. The question is the size, right? So because of Beira, Maputo, etc., there is a market that is really needing this kind of products. If you can address logistics, which is a big challenge there, is to get products to flow from point A to point B without killing the cost. And if you can really capture also the cold chain, I don't know what kind of products you have. If you also have food or fresh products like medicines, etc., then you would have a real killer app that could be scalable. Yeah, it's something quite interesting, and definitely an acquisition target. So as an investor, what I look at is, if I get in, how do I exit, right? So it might not be a primary market for a Jumia, but for somebody like me as an investor in early stage, I'd rather go, help you guys grow, put the right technical assistance in order to address those points, logistics, etc., bring the right capacity, and what I would think of exit. And I already know who I would exit with. So That's a typical case study for success.
So
Can
you're gonna poke at him after the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I
I'll give
can,
it to you.
just to add a somewhat different perspective, first of all, I don't look at the product because I just assume it's going to change. And I also don't look at the numbers because I don't believe them. They're either too low or too high. But I do look at the person and the team. And in the case of Mozambique, where I know nothing, I would obviously ask a few questions. But one thing is, in a smaller market, you probably have much less competition or less effective competition. And yeah, you also, as Mahmoud said, then maybe you can become part of a multi-country thing. So it's, the question is, are you the best in your country? Are you doing something useful? And is the team capable of doing it? So I invested in basically the Google of Albania, not because I think it's going to get that large, but because I think someday it's going to be a very nice asset as part of something bigger. And I really liked the guy doing it. And it really wasn't Google, it was something else that was more suitable for Albania. It was less focused on search and probably more like Yahoo, but it seemed to fit its market.
Yeah. And she makes a very important point about the entrepreneur. Is at the center of everything. Honestly, business plans, 10, 15% end up happening, right? But what you're really betting on is the person carrying the idea. And how much will that person be able to adapt with goods or bad times? And that's really what you're putting most of you. Personally, I would put 70% of my appreciation on the entrepreneur and really spend time analyzing him, his team, how he operates with his people, or her, sorry, right? Actually,
You're trying.
or her. No, I was thinking of him, but her too, right? But right, yeah. So and actually, we've invested more in entrepreneurs than entrepreneurs. So. But it's true because you can even think of Google's business plan. Nothing of what they said ended up happening. But it was just a combination of bright, visionary guys who had an ultimate vision about something. And that's really what matters at the end of the day. You can't predict what the weather is going to be in 2 years. But you can predict what kind of person you're betting into.
So a quick point on Mozambique. So I spent some time. We nearly built a busy internet there, by the way, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And I actually nearly backed a guy who decided then to go do an MBA instead of being an entrepreneur. But recently I'm helping set up an angel network. So there's an angel network that is emerging in Mozambique by way of a friend of mine in Portugal who runs the Portuguese angel network. And they've actually invested in some companies in Mozambique already. So it's actually happening in Mozambique. I just getting to know of it. I just got introduced to them. We've been talking. So we're actually looking to bring our Angel First. We have this Angel Fair event called Angel Fair Africa, where we bring entrepreneurs to pitch to angel investors. This year we're doing it in Kenya from the 10th to 11th of November. Next year we're doing it in Ivory Coast from the same time. And we're thinking about 2018 coming to Mozambique. So let's poke each other afterwards.
All right.
I have a question.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Been holding this for a while. So I have to comment on the Five Kings because Senegal is leading Ivory Coast on the digital sphere.
That's the whole idea of the kings, right? Create a challenge so everybody can come up. So yes.
But those are the queens.
And queens, yes. And queens.
So my name is Victor Nsar. I'm from Dakar, Senegal.
Yeah.
Magnifique. So I'm a beauty entrepreneur. I have a beauty company and I cater to women of color needs. I've started 10 months ago and I'm selling in 3 countries already. But my problem is I was telling many people in this room, where are the investors in cosmetics? I'm yet to find them. And cosmetics is the second biggest industry in Africa after agriculture right now. So I don't understand why we don't have more investors in that industry. So I'm asking where should I go to find them?
So first of all, Senegal is also, there's an angel investment community emerging in Senegal.
Teranga Capital.
Teranga Capital. So I'm going to connect you with what's his name? He used to write CTIC, some friend of mine. So I'll connect you with him. There's also IMP. There's quite about, at least I know, about 5 funds and some few angel investors in Senegal. So if we poke each other, I'll do that. And also you should connect with, sorry, I'm doing this because I want to see Maguette Wad. Do you know Maguette Wad?
Yes,
she's in the same space.
the lady,
Yeah,
Chosan.
she's back Chosan. So she's doing the same thing and we've been
Yes,
sort of
in the
talking.
US.
So she knows a few people that have backed her up. So probably we can do some,
Definitely.
maybe over Chibujan, maybe.
Yeah, you know Senegal. Okay.
I'm actually invested in a company there, Teranga Solutions. So I spent quite a bit of
Right.
time in that.
Cool.
Maybe, I mean, because I think it's a good broader point about sort of investment in the sector in Africa,
Yeah.
right? So you just pointed out some angels, but in general, when you're looking across the continent, what are the key sectors that investors are looking at right now?
Yeah, unfortunately, technology is getting the upper hand, but let's be very honest that sort of we're seeing this innovation even in renewables. So if you take the solar space, and I think you can speak a lot to that and the whole climate challenge, I think we're seeing innovators across that board. I mean, agriculture is becoming sexy again. I know 3 funds that are doing ag, right? Ag value chain has become a great thing. Village Capital is doing, we partner with Village Capital. They're doing a section on ag value chain. So how do you get entrepreneurs to start innovating? Because trust me, you have to eat before you program, right? So all of us had to eat before we come here. So ag is just going to be there. So how do we add value, right? You know, Africa is just a spot. You want to add to, can I show sort of on your stuff that you guys do in ag and
Yeah. So also
And not specifically what you're doing, but just in general as you're looking.
No, I mean just a sector question, right? I think I think digital applications in ag, digital applications in other sectors where digital comes together, I think that's a very powerful growth area. I mean, you know, the usual thing about farmers accessing prices of markets through mobile phones, stuff like that. I think we see a lot of interest in that overlapping sectors.
And logistics.
And logistics.
Honestly, boring things tend to be the most useful. And exciting things, too many people invest in them and the valuations go up. But if it's boring, chances are it's going to be profitable or people wouldn't have bothered to do it.
for his logistics?
And also I think at early stage you can't really speak about industry specific investors. They become industry specific when you're at growth capital level or at development capital level because they're putting a significant number of money and they need to demonstrate to their LPs, etc., that they have this specific strategy.
But what is also important at an early stage is that angels invest in what they know.
Yeah.
So at an early stage, because you're investing in a person, you got to invest in what you know. So it's hard for me to do an ag investment because I don't know ag, right? But if somebody is bullshitting me about technology, I can smoke him out very quickly. Right? So it's an easier thing for me to do.
I mean, honestly,
But I may be wrong.
Yeah, but
you might find some female investors, and somebody who became rich as the middle manager in a ladies' fashion company or something might be a much more interesting investor to you than some guy who knows all about digital but really doesn't understand
Exactly, yeah.
cosmetics.
So it's not so much about what, especially at Angel. I know. I mean, the few investments I did over the past 10 years. I mean, I messed up a few of them, to be honest, right? But at Angel level, it's generally what you like or what you know, right? It's not necessarily because you're an expert in this. It's because you like an idea, you like the person, you want to back that person, right? As an entrepreneur, I wouldn't advise anyone to do something because he's gonna have more chances to find an investor in that area, right? Because you won't sustain yourself anyway, right? Think of something that you think makes sense. Now you have 2 options with that thing. Anyone has 2 options. Either you decide it's something you want to leave off, or you decide something you want to make it a breakthrough, right? And that make a legacy. Those 2 things, it depends on the way you basically address your thing. So cosmetics, clearly, you can have 2 options. You know Mam Kharidian? Yeah, right. I went to school with her. And she's doing very well in that space, right? So I won't tell you I taught her a few things, but not in cosmetics for sure. But she decided that she wanted to have a specific size, and she's happy with it. But it's something that could be highly scalable, right? So, and cosmetics in Africa, clearly, I can tell you, you're in the right spot. Now, the question is, how competitive your product is versus a L'Oreal or something else, right?
So I think because I think we have how much? 5? We have 5 minutes left. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 3 questions, and we're going to do a rapid round, and I'm going to start cutting off people too, so that we can actually hear what you have to say. So let's do 3.
Right here.
Okay.
My name is Roy Okukwe. I'm based out of Washington, D.C., but I was originally born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. First of all, I love the outfit. I need the name of your tailor.
Made in Senegal.
He's raising money.
My question is more towards the what you guys mentioned about African investors being conservative. So what I do is I do comic books and animation, but they're all based on African characters. And growing up, I loved Superman and Batman. I used to watch them every morning, but I didn't see any African characters, any African superheroes. And I thought that it'd be cool for someone to do it. 20 years later, no one was doing it, so I decided I'm going to try and do it myself. So I created an animated short, and I pitched it to a lot of people that I know, and also investors that people hooked me up with. And the first question they're asking me is like, okay, how much is it going to make, or who's doing it? And I'm like, nobody. And they were like, how are we going to make money? I was like, because no one has done it. And the general consensus was like, okay, yeah, it looks good, but we don't know if we can back this. So what I did is that I decided I was going to do a proof of concept. So I put all my money into doing it as a graphic novel first, a comic book. Wow. And I released that last year, and literally immediately was featured on CNN, Forbes, BBC, New York Times. So it's doing well.
That's great.
Now I want to go back to them. And I've gone back and I'm saying, look,
Your question is?
Yeah, my question is, because
we don't have a lot of
it's
time.
like, why are they so conservative? Because even now that I've gone back with the proof that it works, people are still asking me, well, nobody has done it, we're not sure whether I want to invest in it. And I'm actually getting more attention from international investors as opposed to people from where I'm from.
Great. So why are they so conservative? Next question. Yes.
Okay, I'm Shingi Wazwanda from South Africa, and I'm involved in digitizing African classrooms through e-learning software as well as device furniture. My question is really twofold. Firstly, with regards to the Pan-African Accelerator Program, I know you said you've selected already. I just want to understand, you haven't selected. So how can we get onto the program?
Tayo.
Tayo, fantastic.
You're on
And
the
then,
same lane, same track.
All right.
and then also, if there's any projects that you are involved in, intra-Africa trade sits just under 12% of African trade with the world. Are there any projects that you guys are involved in encouraging intra-Africa trade?
Right.
Yes.
Third question. Yes. Who's got the mic?
Yeah, I have it. My name is Faith Chage. I'm from Kenya, Nairobi, and I've been working on a company for the last 5 months now, that's basically bridging entrepreneurs and investors. And what I've found as the greatest need is that entrepreneurs think that there is no money, then investors lack a pipeline of bankable projects to invest in. So there's clearly a gap in between there. It's like Mars and Venus. And in bringing these two entities together, one of the things that has really been profound in the past couple of days at GS Plus yesterday as well, is that investors from Silicon Valley argue that there's a need for local capital to sort of build the confidence of investment into Africa. And my question to you is, what are you doing to just harness more of the local capital to build the confidence of other investors from the foreign countries to sort of come more into Africa? And I believe if that can be done, then we have more money flowing. Yeah.
Great. All right. So do we want to take a fourth? Let's take one more. Let's take one more, because I think that that question on the program specific will provide you with the information. So I think we can take a third really quickly. And then
Okay, so can I go?
And whoever has the microphone.
I have it here.
Yeah.
My professor taught me if nobody pays attention, just stand up. Anyways, I'm from Sierra Leone. My name is Pakima. I'm running an ISP, and we're also creating a virtual app that allows you to get like a local number. So you just download and then you get a local number. But I've been in the tech industry and also the financial services industry. One of the commonalities among the market in Africa is they don't communicate. So as a huge risk of scaling up in terms of payment is so cash rich, and then we don't really have like automated system to manage cash. So how, from the investor side, you're looking at focusing on pioneering the side of ensuring that you look at tech startups that are focusing on financial services so that you enhance the electronic payment system.
Great.
Thanks.
All right, so one question to answer for each, and then we'll probably have to close. So please, we'll start with you.
Mamadou.
Okay, to your question about conservatism, we all have this problem. As an African, the hardest people to convince about when you raise money in Africa is Africans. Now, no, true story. But there are a few reasons to that, and it's going to be changing. And if I were you, what you're doing is perfect for crowdfunding, actually. You don't need to go to institutional. They're going to ask you stupid questions, while you have a market that is ready for this and that can actually fund you directly, which are your clients. Crowdfunding is perfect for what you're doing. On the capital gap, the main challenge is success stories. They're only coming out now. And institutional funding. So pension funds and all those institutions on the continent are slowly brought into, but it took a long time to review regulatory framework and also get them to have confidence in the private sector, in the market. So you were a bit early in the curve. Hopefully within the next 2-3 years, you're going to see a lot of change. And Ubuntu Capital will be part of that, so follow us.
I'm going to answer the same question with a few other thoughts. Again, I know less about Africa. What I saw in Russia and other places might be relevant. The first is people in general are conservative when they don't have a lot. You know, it's people who feel comfortable that they can lose, who are going to be comfortable. So it's really important as an entrepreneur to help them. You know, you can't guarantee your thing will succeed. Help them understand they should diversify. Help them see success stories. And there's also, you know, it just takes time for this to spread, which doesn't solve your immediate problem. But one thing I find a lot of startups do is, you know, they write to Bill Gates or they go to a big bank, and the person who's more likely to back you is your uncle, who knows you're diligent, knows you're hardworking. You know, you have to be lucky to have that right uncle, but maybe it's someone you worked for 3 years ago who works in a large company and now has a little money set aside. I mean, there's people who have money get lots and lots of people asking for it, but the people who have somewhat less money are much less famous, and they're often a much better source, and they will have time to support you because they're not so busy. So it's, don't go after the famous source everybody's going after, but go after people who are much more conscious of you and your capabilities and are going to have your back.
Yeah, so I'll try to break your question and your question. So actually the numbers on FDI and inter-African trade is actually changing. So if in percentage terms, FDI inflows are not as growing as fast as they used to be, but we're seeing inter-African trade actually growing. In other words, we're beginning to see more trade between South Africa and Kenya, for example, and between South Africa and Nigeria, right? And that links to your question. And I think part of what is happening is that there are more and more local investors backing companies, right? And generally, the companies are beginning to think, well, if I'm doing it in Nigeria, I should go to South Africa as opposed to trying to go to England, right? And I think that, so to connect the puzzle, what my big vision is, how do you use angel investing to address intra-African trade? Because you're right, I mean, no part of the world has grown or has sort of become globally competitive by just exporting raw materials and just importing everything else, right? So how do we add value? And you have to, it's internal, you have to start bottom up and then build it out. And so our Angel Fair events tries to bring local investors with international investors like Esther, right? And say, how do we partner to then invest in entrepreneurs locally? Because, I mean, really, well, Esther is kind of unusual in that sense where she's able to go to Russia. But one of the things about early stage investing, that you invest within a certain radius that you can easily see the entrepreneur. And most, again, talking about conservatism, even in Silicon Valley, the rule is 4-hour drive. Right? Most investors here want to invest in companies you can drive to in 4 hours. Right? They won't go beyond 4 hours. Right? Even the US is East Coast and West Coast. So the investors will just do East Coast and they don't do West Coast. All right. So it's got to be local and then you got to zoom it out. And I would like to invite you to come to the Angel Fair that we do in Africa. We're doing it in Kenya this year from 10th to 11th November. We bring the best entrepreneurs, we bring investors. And we think that this is how Africa is going to dominate the 21st century and bring out the best companies in the world.
There you go, Ganesh.
I'm out of time, I think.
I was gonna say, last
So
word.
let me just say one thing. I think it's a glass half empty, glass half full situation for me. If you look at where the financial sector is heading, we're looking at things like psychometric assessment of entrepreneurs to look at their credit worthiness. We're looking at what is your Facebook profile like? What is your LinkedIn profile like? What kind of story can we build about the entrepreneur, and can we bet on this person, she or him? And then peer-to-peer lending, crowdfunding platforms. I can go on, but I think we are heading towards a technological leap in terms of how we assess risk and how we finance or we cost risk and we manage risk. So I'm optimistic that we'll get there.
Can I say one more thing, very briefly?
I was going to say, very brief.
Okay. So sometimes when I go places, I joke that I'm an American and I see every problem as an opportunity. And that's really what investors do. You have a problem? Great. Solving it is an opportunity. There's not enough money in your marketplace? Great. It means your competition won't be funded. So with that attitude, you can leave this room feeling happy.
And on the funding part, the reality also why there is no money for new businesses is that where the money sits today, or where the wealthy people are, they made it either in trading, which is what we call buy and sell 'em, right, or through politics. So technically, they don't understand all those things. I can tell you, I speak to them every day, really every day. They don't understand. It's complex. It's not the usual, buy, sell, trade stuff, right? And it's not like you talk and you make money through your talk somehow because you know somewhere, right? So there is an emerging generation that needs to be tapped into, and there's a lot of education to be done. Actually, the best way to reach and access those people actually is to talk to their kids, because they understand better. And trust me, I did it. And because they understand better, and they're also closer to this kind of capital. But there's a huge cultural gap that our responsibility today is also to close and bring closer so that we can turn all this capital. There's $600 billion sleeping. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think give this panel a hand and give yourselves a hand, because this is the ecosystem really creating and forming. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Congrats.